Good morning. I'm Heather Sweet, the Alberta NDP MLA for Edmonton Manning and the Critic for Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development. I'm joined by my colleagues, Court Ellingson. He is the Alberta NDP MLA for Calgary Foothills and our Critic for Tech and Innovation. And of course, our Lethbridge West MLA, Shannon Phillips, who is our financial critic for insurance and pension issues. We're gathered here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 7, and I acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. It's been a tough time for a lot of Albertans lately, particularly those in rural Alberta. We've had fires, floods, tornadoes, drought, and so much more. With May's wildfires followed by flash flooding and a tornado, 2023 has been an exceptional year for natural disasters. But through it all, rural Albertans have stood strong. In so many cases, it's ranchers and farmers who have played a pivotal role in pushing back on Alberta fires, staying behind to evacuate and to risk their own livelihoods as their property underwent significant damage. And I know that producers have what it takes and are ready and willing to weather what comes in the near future. But things should be fair for all involved and everyone impacted. While the UCP government has released funding to offset costs of wildfire damage for municipalities and for settlements, this funding intentionally excludes agriculture producers from receiving aid. Homeowners, renters, small business owners, landlords, agricultural operations, nonprofit groups, and condo associations are not eligible for the disaster recovery program under this current government. This is why I've written to the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food to request a meeting during the Calgary Stampede to ensure that the needs of producers are being met. Alberta farmers and ranchers deserve some assurance that the damage sustained to their operations will be offset with real disaster relief. Now, rather than step up when they're needed, the government says that private insurance should be used first, and to look at risk management packages offered by various groups. But I've heard from producers and those who are impacted that the assistance for the loss of direct infrastructure is significantly lacking. The province has stated their intention is to examine funding options for residential damage, but producers in rural Alberta are severely limited in what they may apply for, and they just have not got the assurance from this government about the losses that they've experienced. Municipalities and counties across the province have declared agricultural disasters, and still, the UCP and the new minister are silent, only citing options available through the federal government's business risk management programs. The federal minister and the provincial minister of agriculture are in Calgary this week. They're flipping pancakes, they're taking pictures, but they're not talking to producers. But even during the celebrations of Stampede, they need to be meeting with farmers and ranchers to find out what support they need. My hope is that we can all sit down and come up with a plan to make things better for those that are struggling with massive losses due to natural disasters and those who do not qualify under the rules built out by the current government. Farmers and ranchers expect the province and the federal government to work together. Cooperation is essential to provide producers with the support needed to maintain the viability of their farms and ranches. Agriculture is vital to our economy, now and in the future, and it is absolutely critical to the economic future of the province. They're great innovators, they're very dedicated, and they have pride in the industry. But when it's struggling, it needs support. And as the Agriculture and Rural Economic Development Critic, I'm happy to facilitate conversations to ensure that we can support the industry and that people who support their way of life for all Albertans. Thank you so much, and I'll take your questions.
Okay, we'll start with questions in person, then go to questions on the line. Adam?
When it comes to infrastructure, I'm just curious what kind of falls under that term when it comes to infrastructure, and is that damage from the wildfires, floods, or is it the very dry conditions that we've been seeing across the province right now?
So there's two key things that are happening in agriculture right now in regards to infrastructure. So in the north with the fires, there were beef producers that lost their fence lines and weren't able to access their water wells. They need to be able to rebuild. And so they're waiting to hear from this government what that financial assistance will look like. In the south, what we've heard is that there was a project that was directly related to irrigation that actually was broken, and they hadn't fixed it. They promised producers that they would, and now many of the crops in the south are failing.
And I guess, yeah, maybe some people would look at this and say, well, these farmers do have insurance, these producers do have insurance. Why not rely on that first before stepping in? What would you say to people who would say something like that?
So the insurance that many of our beef producers actually are eligible for is the Agri Stability and the Agri Recovery Program. And that is a shared financial responsibility between the province and the federal government. But for that to be able to be available, the province has to request it. And as of right now, the minister hasn't had any conversations in requesting that assistance for our producers. We saw this last year when we were looking for feed supports for beef producers, when the crops were failing, and it wasn't until October that producers started to get assistance. That's too late.
Any other questions in person? No? Okay, see none, we'll go to questions on the line. First question goes to Alex McQuaig.
Thanks for taking my question. Sorry, just clarification on that last mark. You said last year, you mean 2021 or last year regarding that assistance coming in October?
So it was last year when the Coots blockade was shut down, producers weren't able to access feed. And so the cost of feed went up substantially, especially as well due to the drought. And so we were seeing costs going up substantially. It wasn't until October that the province and the federal government started to offer the $90 a head.
Was there a follow-up, Alex?
And just regarding the new minister, I mean, what do you think that says? What should producers take from that? I mean, I don't think the new minister has made any public remarks. Very limited written statements regarding the situation, whether it's the irrigation failure at Lethbridge Northern Irrigation District or the current situation with drought. I guess, what's your take of that lack of public response or communication with this situation?
Well, again, I think that speaks to the government's lack of respect for rural Alberta, and again, leaving our producers and our ranchers out to dry. They are the economic driver of the province. We saw that during COVID. They are job creators in their local communities. They support the local businesses in their local communities. And without the support of agriculture, many of our rural communities wouldn't be able to be as economically stable as they are right now. The minister needs to stand up and needs to start telling people what he's working on and how he's going to support rural Albertans.
Okay, our next question goes to Catherine Gurkowski.
Hi there, thanks for taking my question. So I'm wondering, I'm just hoping to get clarification on what you're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking for tweaks to existing programs to increase eligible help? Are you looking for a new stream of funding? Are you asking for the government to just use what we've got available and ask the federal government for that Agri Stability and Agri Recovery funding? What is the ask?
So the ask is that the provincial and federal government meet this week and come out by the end of this week with a plan to support producers. They need to request the ability to start accessing Agri Recovery and Agri Stability funding for our producers.
Okay, was there a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, actually, no follow-up, thanks.
Okay, no worries. I'll do one more pass for questions, either in person or on the line. And seeing none, that's all for today.